You have bills stacking up, loans to pay. You need to put food on the table for your family. You only have a certain amount coming in from your next paycheck. How could you have prevented this? Well, you could have prepared an emergency fund. What is an emergency fund? As the name suggests, an emergency fund is a fund which is only used for big purchases when you have no other choice. It acts as a backup in case you lose your job or have to pay more than your income is currently bringing in. How can you start working towards one? Saving. It's only part of the equation. How you earn your money and how you spend it also impacts your ability to save. You need to increase your savings, which can be done by increasing your income, getting a casual job. Even an extra $50 a week adds up over time. Doing surveys online, this could only be $10 to $20 a week, but it adds up. Or reducing your expenses. Spending is broken down into mandatory expenditures, includes money spent on consumer items such as water, basic food, basic clothes, basic housing or fuel. These are classified together as needs that you cannot live without. Or discretionary expenditures can be classified as anything that is not a want, things that you may want. That's not a need, things that you may want, but if necessary, you could live without. Examples include high quality food, coffee, and a gym membership, all which I include in my daily life, but if I had to, I could cut out. These make your life better and improve your overall living standard. However, you may have to limit discretionary expenditures in order to build your emergency fund. Well-known and quite overused phrases such as "don't buy coffees out" or "pack your lunch" may not be your saving grace to build an emergency fund, but if you're struggling to have savings, it may be necessary to cut down on all your discretionary spending. Everything that is a want, not a need. I'm going to put up an example of going through your mandatory expenditures. I've not included a car and the numerous costs it leads to. I just don't have a car, so I'm not going to include that. The example I have put above has a goal of a 6 months emergency fund of $20,700. This is an extreme case. Not many people have this much, but you should just put down your discretionary expenditures and mandatory and break them down. You should just find 10% to 30% if you're available, if it's available, that you can put towards your fund. Next, where do you store it? You need to find a high yield savings account. This is where you store your emergency fund. In the description, I will link a copy of all the Australian ones. I don't know many American ones, but I might have a look. Most will offer 2 to 4% annual returns. While this is small returns compared to the 7-8% in the stock market, it is secure. You don't risk losing this money as it's a bank account. This will likely keep up with inflation or sometimes beat it depending on the current policies. So long term, you have a significant amount of purchasing power that is not eroded over time that you can use as a key whenever is necessary. If you put in the stock market, you may not want to take it out, maybe fees taking out. With a high yield savings account, you can always access it. This is I will switch to a massive caveat here. If you have high interest debt, focus on paying that down first. It is risky to not have a emergency fund. However, you need to get rid of your debt. Pay off those credit cards and make sure you limit your debt. A small caveat is if you have a home loan, you can use your offset account to limit your interest payments, well, doubling as a secure account to build your emergency fund. That's only for homeowners. In conclusion, you should aim for 3 to 6 months of being able to provide for yourself and your family if you have one. However, even if you have a 1 month fund, this is something to be proud of, as 1/3 of Americans don't have an emergency fund at all, which basically means no savings. In this example, it was 3 months equaled 10,350, 6 months equaled 20,700. This is based on a median American in terms of income and costs. If they needed their lost their job or got sick, they would need this money to survive. So calculate your monetary costs and chuck in some extra spending on discretionary items if you want, and find out how much you need to survive and start working towards it.